This video is going to walk you through the grammar check for the first quarter. First of all, we're going to talk about distinguishing between a phrase and a clause, which was the first part of the grammar check. Assuming that you got the matching part at the top correct, then you should be able to apply them on the other questions. Number 4 says another name for a sentence is, and basically it's just asking if it would be dependent or independent clause. Because a sentence has to be able to stand alone, that means it has to be an independent clause. Some students get independent and dependent mixed up, but if you think about independent is like an adult, you have to be able to stand on your own and support yourself, whereas a dependent is more like a child who is dependent on others for assistance. Like a teenager, you're not ready to be out in the world by yourself. So dependent, you cannot stand alone. Independent, you can. So the correct answer was C. An independent clause is another name for a sentence. Now the next ones ask you to identify between phrases and clauses. The first one wants you to find the clause, which means that 3 out of the 4 have to be phrases. Remember, the main difference between a phrase and a clause is the fact that a clause will have a subject and a verb, a noun and a verb working together like a subject-verb combination. Whereas a phrase might have a subject or a verb, but they will not be working together in the set of words. So we need to test all of them, and the first one says, with a little help from my friends. Some of these might seem familiar because if you remember, we did a jump start that had these exact same ones on it. So if you study your jump start, sometimes that can help you with the grammar checks. Anyhow, if we look at this one, we see that we have friends, which is typically most students would say, oh, that's a noun, and we have help, which help can sometimes be a verb. But in this case, help is actually acting like a noun because it is in a prepositional phrase. And friends are not the ones doing the help. They're not side-by-side friends help in a subject-verb combination. So that is a phrase, so we cross that off. That cannot possibly be the answer. The next one says the gym on the north side of the school. We have gym, which is a place, side, which is a place, and school, which is a place. All nouns, but we don't have any verbs. And actually, we have the prepositional phrases on the north side and of the school. So if you get rid of prepositional phrases, a lot of times that will help you. So once again, we do not have a clause. That's not the answer. Learning to fly a kite. Well, if you remember this one from the jump start, a lot of people wanted to talk about kites and whether or not they can do the flying. But we know it actually takes a person to do it. But we have kite that is a noun. We have fly, which is a verb. But now that you know that it's an infinitive, we have to fly. That's an infinitive. And learning. We don't have the actual person who's doing the learning in the sentence. So we do not have a clause once again. We actually have a verbal phrase. So the last one we think is the answer, but just to be sure, let's test it. It says, while he watched television. Some students would look at while and think that maybe that's a preposition, but it's actually a subordinate clause, which is something that connects independent and dependent clauses in sentences. So once again, let's find nouns and verbs. We have television as a noun, he a pronoun, and we have watched, which is a verb. So we do, in fact, have a person who's doing the watching here, a subject-verb working together, which means that ding, 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 there's our clause. All right, we do the same thing on the next one, starting with sitting on the porch. Well, we don't know who's sitting on the porch. So we have sitting, which is a verb, and we have porch swing, which is a place. It's actually a prepositional phrase. So we have nothing more than a verb and a prepositional phrase. So it cannot be a clause. The next one says, after he exercised at the gym, we have he that's a pronoun, gym that's a noun, and exercising or exercised. And we do actually know who's doing the exercising, so he exercised. So I'm thinking that's my answer, but just to be sure, I'm going to test the next 2, which are very similar to the first 2. Only C says, while sitting on the porch. So we simply added the word while to the phrase, which does not make it a clause. Simply adding the word while links it to something else, but it does not make it a clause. After exercising at the gym, this is similar to B, only we've taken out the person who has exercised, which then makes it a phrase, right? If you don't have the person who's doing the action of the verb, it cannot be a clause. So we have exercising and we have Jim, but of course Jim's not doing the exercising. Jim, G-Y-M, not J-I-M as in the name Jim. Number 7, the last one, wants you to find the phrase, which means that 3 of them are going to have subject-verb combinations and be clauses, and 1 is not. So we're going to test all 4. The first one is when you purchase new shoes. Shoes is a noun, you, noun, and purchase is a verb. So we actually have you doing the purchasing, so can't be a phrase because there's a subject-verb. Since I lost my wallet, wallet is a noun, I is a noun, and lost is a verb. So I lost works together as a clause, cannot be a phrase. Behind the kitchen counter. All we have is kitchen counter being the noun, which actually is a prepositional phrase. So I'm thinking that is my answer, but just to be sure, I'm going to test the very last one, which is he was born on Halloween. Born, was born is a verb, he the pronoun, and on Halloween prepositional phrase. So it does have a subject verb, he was born. So that cannot work as a phrase. So the correct answer is C. And that's how you mark up your paper and try to find subject verbs in order to distinguish between phrases and clauses.